Welcome to the weekly Threat Insights group discussion. Jumping right into the agenda, we've got a number of accomplishments to highlight. So that list is as of 5 p.m. yesterday. If you've closed anything since then, it will show up next week. Good job, team. Go team. There's a couple of items. There's a couple of follow-up items from previous discussion. I added both of them. There have been a lot of conversations, and Tiago's not here, and I know that Philippe has strong opinions about this as well. I wanted to make sure this was discussed around the group search. I know this was around the project filter, but I think Tiago is tying, this to some of the other observations we've had around configuring the instance level dashboard, and I think there might have been one other. I think they're all linked to from this issue now. So I don't actually have a lot to add to this conversation. I just feel like I've seen a lot of discussion in comments and in Slack, so I wanted to see if this was something that we should be tackling synchronously as a group to understand, is this a bigger problem? Is this a GitLab-wide problem? Is this something with our implementation? Is this something that we should be putting some more priority on? So Matt, have you had a chance to look at this at all?
Yeah, it is definitely a big usability issue, especially when there are a large number of projects underneath it. It is, I guess, I don't know, or I haven't read the full discussion yet, but from a broad perspective, Philippe, help me out here. It seems like we keep hitting the same issue over and over again, and I don't know if that's just because we're sort of re-implementing behavior or the underlying components we're grabbing are just like the GitLab components are not working properly. Because it's not just our area. It seems like there's other parts of the product where you can't find the project search or the project you're searching for.
It is definitely a shared component. And this issue has been raised already by Tiago like 3, maybe 4 weeks ago. So that's a duplicate.
Well, the other issue is linked to here, and that's specific to the security dashboard. And there's another one, the project approval rules. So Tiago has gone through and linked the related issues to this one. This is specific to the project filter. So I think they might be the same root cause, but they are different end impacts on the customer. And I know Alan took a look at this, and Alan, you had some feedback around the number of results that you were returning, which is what made me start to question, how much of this was shared and how much of this was our implementation. But Alan, did you want to elaborate on the GraphQL limitations there?
Whenever we use GraphQL and there's a pagination used, we're always limiting to 100. But I believe we might, like other parts or other components of the GitLab are not yet using all like GraphQL APIs. So that's why, for example, when you do autocomplete first like suggestions like for users or for merge requests or issues, you're just calling the API that will give you the whole list of all items. So I believe this is something that we are experiencing because we are using GraphQL, and that's it.
So it's kind of a growing pain of adopting this technology before other groups have. You had a suggestion around modifying this to send the requests with the value from the input field. And I know that raises a lot of questions around type ahead and such. At what point do we send that request? Is it with every keystroke? But versus retrieving one list and then filtering down that list, making the call back out to the GraphQL endpoint as the customer inputs what they're searching for. There's definitely performance considerations there, but I know that's why most big search engines work, right?
I mean, that's how that that's how that security dashboard feature that I implemented, where it's searching by similarity, it sends a search field along with it as the user types. So I mean, we're already using that there. That is behind a feature flag at the moment to make sure that we're not going to adversely impact the system.
Sorry, Jonathan, where are we already using that?
Sorry, in the global security dashboard.
Okay.
When you're looking for projects to add to the security dashboard, it's behind, like I said, it's behind a feature flag.
And that feature flag's off right now, so we wouldn't see that in production today. We're testing it there.
Right. I've got it on in staging. I believe
Okay.
I turned it on in staging to check that out there. But we can turn it on per. We can turn on per user. I'm not sure about group, but it's not. It can't be at the project level because it's like all the projects.
So if that improves the results, the experience for that larger dashboard, we could take those same approaches with this as well. I
would think so. It has to do with the similarity sort and looking at this. I don't know if it searches for the ones that are in security. I haven't looked at the back end of this thing, if it's actually going through GraphQL at the moment, or if it's just a straight API call right now.
The project filter?
Yeah, this project filter.
It's GraphQL.
GraphQL, okay.
Well, we'll leave this bug open, and I know you guys have already added these comments, so this is really helpful. We'll make sure that. Does it make sense to keep this bug as what's tracking the longer term fix of applying those same findings that depending on whether they work for the instance level dashboard, applying those same approaches to this project filter through this bug ticket?
It might be worth to go ahead and use the same approach that we've got on the on the global security dashboard, and just again put it behind the feature flag. So that we're still same feature flag, same similarity. Although Alan, did you say that this would be a new the search field would be a new parameter sending?
Yep.
Okay.
So it's a bit of a bigger change rather than.
That is a bigger change. So
okay. I think it'd be good to ensure that the tests to the global security dashboard are successful before we put that effort into it. And it's good that we have this use case to look at to see that's very, very similar, to see if it's resolving our issues there. Okay. I don't want to stay on this too long because we only have a half hour, but thank you for your feedback, Jonathan and Alan. We don't need to get into this and discuss it in this call. I just wanted to point everyone to the dismissal types reason issue that Andy is ready for some early design review on. So it's not in planning breakdown state yet. So this would be asking him questions around the designs in an early phase. So just a heads up for everyone there. And Alexander, demo. Woo.
Yes. Hey, there's a demo. The pipeline widget is there with a fast follow-up coming of showing Savash's beautiful failed pipeline widget as well. TBD.
Awesome.
And onward.
Philippe.
I'm trying to understand what is this change. The security dashboard shows the result of the loss. Could you just explain a bit the screenshot that is above that? Alexander, I'm not sure I understand exactly what you want to demo there.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry. I apologize that was not clear. But basically, so on the vulnerability list now at the top, there is a widget there of the pipeline that was last run on the default branch, and that gives you the time that was last updated and a link to it, so you know how recently that these vulnerabilities have been found.
Okay, got it. Awesome.
So
Thanks.
yeah, if it hasn't been run in a month, then it'll say, you know, a month there, and you'll be like, a user may be like, oh, I wonder if things have changed.
Awesome.
There's also, and then in addition, after the link, there's going to be a badge where it shows if there's been any failed jobs in the latest pipeline. That way, you know, hey, maybe the vulnerabilities we see here aren't all of them. Maybe there's a failed job that if it were passing would give us some critical ones or something like that. And then Matt has shared the issue below.
So that's, okay, it's already on production. Okay, makes sense. If it doesn't show yet if I have one of the jobs failing, like everything is running fine and smoothly, but dependency scanning for some reason failed, I would not see that there, right?
Not yet. Okay. Soon to come, again, there will be a badge that'll say one job failed, and then you'll know.
But in the case that Philippe just described, would it show the time of the last successful run, Alexander?
I do not remember off the top of my head if it's the last successful or the last run that's been on the default branch. I would think it's the last one that's been on the default branch even now. Okay. But again, we'll have that badge up very shortly.
Great. Will we have that in the API directly? Access to this kind of information, I mean?
Probably. Would somebody from the back
let me explain my point here. We have absolutely no control today whatsoever on whether the jobs are configured correctly, if they are running well, or if anything goes wrong. We're just going through the dashboard manually. It's a rotation process. We have one AppSec engineer doing that. We want in the future to scale that because we're just flooded with too many things to do, and we need to automate as much as we can. That's something that we will want to automate in the coming months, like checking the configurations, making sure that the jobs are still running so that everything that we have in the dashboard is correct without assuming that everything is still working smoothly. I'm thinking, for example, the job seems okay. It doesn't report any problem, but we have a rule somewhere because someone changed the CI configuration, and for some reason the job is not running in certain conditions. So we would not see that very easily. We would see that from time to time, but not all the time. So that means the list that we have in the dashboard is not always accurate. And that's a problem for us, because if we can't trust the data that we have in there, we have some blind spots, and that's not acceptable from a security point of view. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So I apologize. I don't understand. Where does the API accessibility factor into this?
Well, we will have some jobs running, I don't know, daily or weekly or at least on a regular basis that will check everything. That will check that all security jobs are running correctly. So that's one API endpoint that we could use. For example, instead of checking all the jobs one by one, we could start with that and say, okay, for the GitLab security dashboard, it's all green. We don't need to dive into the pipeline run to see if everything is there, if everything was reported correctly. We know programmatically that it's running like what we expect.
Got it. So you're running a script that checks to make sure all the security jobs are passing.
Yeah, because guess what? We're not doing that today. I'm 100% sure that in the rotation we barely have time to deal with the vulnerabilities that we have there to try that. So I'm pretty sure no one is paying attention to the configuration itself. So that's something that is on the radar right now. And there's one issue. There's nothing you can do for that, but going to share that video anyway.
Okay. We also need to make sure that we allot some time in this 30-minute meeting for planning breakdown. I know that Philippe, you've got another agenda item after this that I don't think
going very quick.
we're talking about right now, right?
Absolutely. So let's do that right now. Real quick, another problem that we have, the number of vulnerabilities is rising really fast. We have almost 40,000 low findings in the dashboard. There is absolutely no way we will deal with that. So the discussions that we have about this is we're going to just remove somehow all these vulnerabilities because they're just sitting there. It's not good. And once the fix that we're expecting from DAST is going to be there, we're not even sure that it's going to fix the existing data. So we're completely fine starting fresh, but we don't know how to do that. Is there an API endpoint that we can use for that?
As far as I'm concerned, there is no API endpoint to remove vulnerabilities.
Okay.
I think we do have a merge request from Mehmet that basically says, hey, can we truncate this table? And the database reviewer said that, no, we can't truncate tables. We have to do background jobs which will delete records in batches. And I expect this to be the same case for vulnerabilities. So we will have to schedule a background job to delete this in batches.
Okay, makes sense. And by the way, that's a good point to me that we don't have an endpoint to delete vulnerabilities because we have, again, no monitoring of this kind of activities. So that means anyone at GitLab with at least a developer account would be able to do that, and that's not great for us.
I am not sure if we do not have an endpoint, but the last time I checked this, we didn't have an endpoint to delete vulnerabilities.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't
What
believe
about,
we do. This has come up a couple of times. In fact, there was a customer that did something similar, and they, rather than use a test project, used a live project, ran a bunch of scanners, and it found a ton of stuff. And then they said, oh, we want to start over. And yeah, that was actually the resolution, was they had to do a database cleanup directly. And Philippe, your point was kind of my pushback. I don't think we'd want to make it easily accessible to remove or delete vulnerabilities, especially not before we had a full audit trail ability in place and an ability to really restrict that. So unfortunately, yeah, there's not much we can do other than database cleanup.
No, that's fine. So we're going to contact an SRE and then do that with them directly. Perfect.
And Philippe, what you're talking about is not the same as like clicking the check all box in the list and just dismissing them all. That's different than what you're talking about, right?
We could, that was mentioned during our last meeting, but there's no way we can do that for 40,000 findings. You can't select all of them. You can select only what you see, and we're not going to expand these thousands of.
But now, could you dismiss via an API and get around that UI limitation from pagination and do that bulk dismissal via the API?
I do not think that's the case.
Okay.
But if we do not have to drop them from the database, I think it would be reasonably easier to update all vulnerabilities in GitLab.com project and set the status to dismissed. This wouldn't drop any data, and I think there would be less pushback from the database maintainers to mass update the status instead of dropping or truncating the table.
I'm more inclined to, I'm not talking about truncating the table, but at least dropping the records directly. The problem is if we dismiss some of them and there are actually true positives, if they occur again, they're going to be dismissed directly. So we will never see these findings. That's the problem that we have right now. It's so much noise that we don't know what is true from what is false positive. So deleting at least would bring us to a position where everything is clean again and we can start fresh with something that is manageable. And I'm sorry I'm taking a lot of your time here. So I have my answer. You can proceed with your next point, Lindsay. Sorry for.
Okay, this is educational, and I'm glad that you found your answer, Philippe. And if there's an issue around this database cleanup that any of us could help with, or if this conversation needs to continue there, please feel free to share it in either this agenda and the Slack channel. Thanks.
Thanks.
We do have a few items for planning breakdown, and I think we'll probably be lucky if we make it to one. The first one I don't actually think we need to discuss very much. So Alexander has broken down the step one of the MR widget refactor from the front end perspective. We just need someone to do it from the back end. So Mihao, I think I accidentally mentioned Mehmet last week while he was out, but it was intended for you. If you could take a look at that and create, well, Alexander's got a question. You don't think there are any backend changes needed? Shrug.
I was just looking at the front. I just refined them this morning, and it looks like we have, like, the messages are just sort of being updated a little bit. Maybe there's a few states with the like info error states that we maybe need more information, but I think Mihao can probably just wait until I'm like, oh, we don't have this information.
Yeah, I think it would make more sense if Alexander like starts actually working on this, and if he finds that he needs anything, then I can implement it as it is, or if it's a bigger piece of work, then we can create an issue for it and formally track it.
Okay, so Alexander, are you suggesting that you would know that at refinement, or would that be in the in dev workflow state?
In dev.
Okay.
Because I refined it, and yeah, I only went so deep. I was like, I don't know, this looks like a 3.
Oh, you already did refine.
That's how we're supposed to refine. That's how we're supposed to refine it, right? We just sort of look at it and go, this seems like a 3.
Okay, yeah. Well, you're supposed to put an implementation plan on it, and maybe put some thought into it. Like all of these things aside, yeah, just that. No, so we'll wait until. Okay, as long as from a bandwidth perspective and priority perspective, we don't get to a place where we're not able to deliver on things because we've already committed the backend team to other things. This makes me a little uncomfortable. I'll go ahead and say that, but we can continue that conversation in the epic. If you have a strong, it sounds like you have a strong level of confidence that there won't be very much, if any, backend work though, based on what you've seen.
Yeah, there's already several of the states there regarding like the pipeline's outdated, or there's one other state that's already there. And so it's adding just like 2 more, and I think it'll be fine.
Okay. And we've deprioritized the further steps. So step 2, 3, and 4 are sitting in the backlog, waiting for additional prioritization before we go through the, I mean, we've requested the team to do the breakdown. We can slowly move through the refinement process, but we're not going to be seeing them in the upcoming couple of milestones, right, Matt? Right, Lindsay?
Sorry.
Perfect. Then we have, I'm sorry, Matt, go ahead. Okay. Well, then we have plenty of time if I'm wrong.
Okay, well, then again, we were just talking about step 1. I'm saying step 2, 3, and 4, as we've broken down this larger epic already, have been deprioritized. We'll still want to take those epics and make sure that they're ready for when they do become the priority again. I just don't believe that's going to happen for the next at least 2 milestones based on some of the items that we've got listed here.
Yeah, I would actually even go a step further and just say we can shelve any further decomp on those for right now, because there's definitely at least a milestone or 2 of other things in front of that. So I know we've got a very long list of breakdown.
Okay, well, we have 5 minutes. Andy has created the design issue for the generic report schema display on the vulnerability details page. I reached out to, I know Alexander asked last week during this meeting if there's been any updates on whether the front end team from Secure could help to contribute to this effort, given that it's blocking things like their fuzz testing results today. And I talked to Neil about that yesterday. He sounded very positive about that. Him and Fernando are going to start to get involved. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it to this call, but I want to make sure that they're involved in the refinement and breakdown of that issue. That being said, what I'm still unclear of is whether there's back-end work required for this. I thought there was. Thiago's kind of led me to believe otherwise. We have a POC that should answer this question. The problem is that James's POC is quite large, so it's a little hard to, as someone who doesn't have a lot of Ruby experience, go through and look at what pieces of that are about this display versus the other components of that POC. So this, like I said, this is ready for planning breakdown. I don't want to do that today. We don't have time today on this call. We want to make sure that Neil and Fernando are here from a front end perspective. But Mihao and Jonathan, if you guys could take a look at this, or if you've had a chance to take a look at James's POC specific to this area of being able to display the vulnerability details from this generic schema on, so that new scanners can introduce, so scanners could start to use the schema and they'll be able to introduce new data points and we can just eloquently display them out on the page. If you could take a look at the solution and at the very least identify if there is or not, is there not back-end work associated with it. So it's just an ask for the next time we talk. I'll put it here on the agenda. I will actually also put an @ mention in the comments of this issue as a reminder, but I think that's a kind of a big, that'd be a big answer for our planning and moving forward with this. All right, we've scared everyone away from the call.
This looks huge.
It looks huge. The POC is huge. He was tackling some, also in addition to this generic report schema, fingerprinting and how we identify whether a vulnerability is new or not as part of that same change. So I don't know what percentage of it has to do with this generic report schema and what percentage of it has to do with that fingerprinting. It all looked big, so that's why I assumed there was a good amount of back-end work even in this generic report schema display, maybe even database changes, but I'm not confident on that.
Yeah, so Mihao, if you could get us a full report by the end of the day, explaining every line, that'd just be great.
Okay, but only if you order me food for the day. For the reminder of the day.
Is that all it takes? Pizza will be on its way, Mihao. I had a coffee chat with James yesterday about this approach and how we're doing this. We're creating design issues off this POC, and then we're going to break it down like we do with our normal workflow. And I just wanted to feel it out. Like, is James, are we hurting his feelings that we're not just taking his code and dropping it in and move forward? And he very much expected this. His impression is that we'll use it as a reference and we'll pull out what code we want to, but that we will deconstruct it and implement it how we see fit. And he built this POC as an illustrative, as a POC, not actually an implementation. So he's not hurt feelings about it. And he's very, very willing to help and answer questions and all that.
So just to clarify, that the question on this is there going to be back-end work? That
is the question for this part of it. Sorry. Again, there's
the specific part with the templated components.
Correct. So this POC, if you look at the full code base, I think it encompasses a lot more than that. The question is for this templated component piece, I'm assuming there's back-end work. Can you confirm that? And then start to think about how that would break down.
I would be very surprised if there's not back-end work, even if it's just adding a single field to the vulnerability model.
I have taken a look at this merge request, and he added 2 fields to this. What we currently ship to the front end, he added 2 fields, and I imagine that there won't be much more work required other than adding fields.
Okay.
If this only changes the way we display things, then we might have to add a field or remove one, but I don't expect more work to come only from the perspective that we are changing the way how we're displaying things. We might have to shuffle the keys in the hash around, but I don't expect anything like this.
It might be a field, it might be an addition to a GraphQL parameter, a return parameter, or something like that too. But it like I said, it shouldn't be much, I wouldn't think.
This particular view, I think, still uses the Rails helpers.
Is it the Rails?
So
Okay.
this uses Rails helpers, so we just have to change everything in one file and like be done with it.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right, so at the very least need one backend issue. And then, like I said, let's wait till Neil and Fernando and the folks from the front end team are available for the discussion for the planning breakdown on the front end. And we are 1 minute over, so I'm sorry I took that time from you guys because you're all supposed to be playing Drawosaurus now. So please feel free to join us on Drawosaurus. I know there's been a lot of calls this morning. If you don't make it, I understand. I will play by myself if I have to, but you all know how horrible I am at drawing. So hopefully I see you there.
Let's do it. Bye.
Bye.